Well, good evening everyone. We're here with Jason Clare, Shadow Minister for Communications. If you don't mind, we've got a few questions for you live from the Labor community.
Fantastic, sounds good. Let's get started.
So first off the bat, what made you get into politics?
Well, I don't come from a political family. Mum and Dad weren't really that interested in politics, but my first memory of politics was when Bob Hawke became the Prime Minister in 1983. And so I grew up at that time, like Bill Shorten and like a lot of members of the Labor front bench, where Bob Hawke was the Prime Minister and Paul Keating was the Treasurer. And I saw the things they did that transformed Australia. A lot of what Australia is today is because of Bob Hawke and Paul Keating. And I thought, these guys are the sort of people that I want to be when I grow up. I saw how they transformed Australia, opened up the economy, but also made Australia a fairer place to live. Best example of that is Medicare. So I went off to school. I grew up in Cabramatta, in the western suburbs of Sydney. And at school, I met a bloke who probably changed my life as much as the story of Bob Hawke and Paul Keating, and that's my history teacher, Peter Valenti. And Peter told me the stories of great politicians and people of the past, and taught me through those stories that people really can make a difference, that they can change things for the better. And so through Peter, through the stories of Bob and Paul, and through growing up in an area of Sydney which is pretty disadvantaged, where a lot of the kids in my own classroom were refugees, migrants from other countries, where not everybody in my classroom had a mum and a dad, or a mum and a dad with a job, I thought to myself that politics could be the path for me, where I could help the people of my local community where I grew up, and hope and aspire to try and do the sorts of things that Bob and Paul did for my local community and for the whole country.
That's great, and we've got hundreds of people listening live and lots of likes coming in. They're all very interested. What would you say to them that a Labor government means to you?
Oh, look, when you change the government, you really do change the country. And a new Labor government will change the country for the better. There are very big differences at this election between the Liberal Party, the coalition, and the Labor Party. People will have a choice at this election about whether they want to spend $50 billion on a tax cut for big business and multinationals, or whether they think $50 billion would be better spent on things like investing in our kids in schools like the school I grew up in Cabramatta and Canley Vale, or whether we should be investing that money in other things like protecting Medicare, like making sure that when people get sick and they need to go to the doctor, they can afford to go to the doctor. They don't have to pay up front, that their Medicare card will get them access to their doctor. And also that when they get a script from the doctor and they go down to the pharmacist, they can afford the medicine that they need to make them better. 1 in 8 people at the moment get a script from the doctor and then they don't get it filled out. Now, if you don't get your script filled out, you're more likely to get sicker and sicker and sicker. So what we've said is we've got to make a priority protecting Medicare, keeping the price of medicines down, making sure people can afford to go to the doctor by making sure that we protect bulk billing and investing in our kids, because it's by making sure that kids, regardless of what school they go to, where in the country they go to school, they all get the same access to a great education. And I know as a boy from Cabramatta that not all schools are the same. And if you go to my electorate, you'll see fewer people finish school than in other parts of the country. More and more jobs in the future are going to require people to finish high school and then go on to TAFE and university. If you don't do that, your chances of being locked out of the employment market are going to be greater. That's what Gonski's all about, bringing everyone up to the same level, getting more people to finish school, get the skills that they need at TAFE and at university. And I just don't think the Liberals get that. They've always seen education as a cost. The Labor Party's always seen education as an investment.
And that's great. We've got hundreds more viewing and the comments are flowing in, and some of our community members want to know if you feel any pressure being the best looking front bench.
It's a low bar. They say that sort of politics is acting for ugly people, so I don't know if I've got terribly much competition, but I'll take all the compliments I can get.
Look, we've also had a few comments coming in asking about the NBN. How do you think Malcolm Turnbull has managed to mess up the NBN so badly?
Well, where do I start? Oh, God. He's doubled the cost of the NBN. Malcolm Turnbull promised before the last election that he could build the NBN for $29.5 billion. It's now blown out to up to $56 billion. Now, if you were given a job in the private sector and told to build something for a certain price and you doubled the cost of it, you'd probably get sacked. In this case, Malcolm Turnbull's been promoted. He also promised that everybody in Australia, including everyone watching now, would get the NBN this year. So if you're watching this and you're buffering, or you're watching anything else on the internet tonight and you're buffering, blame Malcolm Turnbull, because he said you'd have the NBN now, and the fact is that less than 20% of the country has the NBN. And over the course of the last 3 years, while there's been delay after delay after delay, we've seen Australia go from 30th in the world for internet speeds down to 60th in the world for internet speeds, behind Russia, behind Slovakia, behind New Zealand as well. And we've learnt recently that as well as having to spend millions and millions of dollars to fix up the old copper network to make his second-rate version of the NBN work, they've also had to buy new copper, 10 million metres of new copper. And to put that in perspective, that's enough copper to connect us from where I am here right now in Melbourne all the way to Russia, or almost enough to connect us from here all the way to Silicon Valley. And at the end of the day, double the cost, double the time, slower internet speeds than many other countries in the world. And when it's all said and done, Australians will be left with a second-rate, slower NBN than they really need for the future, that we're going to have to come back and fix.
Well, that's great, and we're seeing the comments coming in that people are buffering as we speak. But Jason Clare, Shadow Minister for Communications, thanks very much for joining the Labor community on Facebook Live.
Thanks, guys. Thanks very much.